Okay, I'm Rich Murset. I'm your son-in-law, I guess, married to Carolyn. And today is February, no,
March the 15th.
March 15th, 2006. And tell us who you are.
I'm Jose Jimenez. I'm Wally Chatwin, and I was born May 18th, 1926 in Provo, Utah.
Okay, you're going to have to talk loud.
Okay.
So you're born in Provo, Utah. Who are your parents?
Sylvan and Ida Chatwin. Those are my parents.
And how did they end up in Provo?
I don't know exactly how, except probably because Grandma and Grandpa Dayton, mother's parents, moved to Provo from Vernal, Utah. And I think Dad's parents were already in Provo. So I guess it was sort of a natural flow.
Okay. And where do you come in the family?
I'm the firstborn. Have a younger sister about 5 years younger, Gloria. And then a younger brother, Gordon, about 5 years after that.
Okay. So you grew up all your life in Provo?
Most of life. We moved during the Depression when I was just a boy. Dad, we all moved to California, Los Angeles, looking for work.
So how long were you there?
I guess I don't really know. I think we were there about a year and a half or two.
And then you came back to Provo.
And we came back to Provo.
Lived
Stopped
in
off
the-
in Patient on the way through the summer, but we came back to Provo.
Did you live in, where did you live in Provo? You probably remember the address.
No, I don't. It was roughly about 4th South and 1st West.
Okay.
But in a home we were renting at the time.
So what are your fondest memories of growing up in Provo?
Fondest memories of growing up in Provo. No, I don't know if I have any fond memories. No, that's a joke. Later on, when we moved up into Pleasant View, my dad was still really struggling for work, and we were a pretty poor family. And my uncle Alden, his older brother, helped him build a little one-room house on Uncle Alden's property, and we lived up there for a while. And then later on, Uncle Alden donated some land, and we built a house up on that land. And that house is about just a little bit south of where the Provo Temple is right now. And my memories there were pleasant because I grew up with a young man named Leslie Leathy. He was a good friend. And we spent a lot of time together. He lived up on the foothills. And he's the one that got me going to church, the primary. He, without giving it some thought, I spent some time with my cousin Junior, who was pretty handy in his shop, woodworking shop, and he did a lot of things, and he was quite a maker of lamps and so forth on his lathe. I'm trying to think of the word to say to describe him. He'd finish up a lamp and make it all nice and pretty, and then I would just be standing there watching him. And then he'd say, "Look what Wallace and I made."
Good.
And I had nothing to do with it except
Moral support.
moral support.
So a typical day of play when you were young, what would that
We
be?
played a lot in the canal. There was a canal right there by us, and there were some wide places in that canal, and it was a couple of feet deep, and we'd go play with boats. Boy, we'd make little wooden boats, and we'd make some harbors back up in those places and float those boats around.
Good. You weren't big horseback riding, that kind of thing?
No, never had any real experience with horses. one summer, Uncle Alden bought a ranch down by Eureka, Utah, and Junior and I and my cousin went down there to work for him that summer. We didn't have horses there either, but we did a lot of farming, irrigating and corn crops and wheat crops and so forth. And there was a dam there. This was an old abandoned ranch farm, and there was a dam there that would catch the water, the runoff from the canyon that was there, and we'd go swim in that. But I didn't really like that because it had a lot of salamanders in it. Boy, it was. But the water was deep enough to swim in, but it was kind of yucky, dirty, and the salamanders were there. But
So you went to, what was the elementary school you went to?
went to Page Elementary School. That building doesn't even exist anymore. They tore it down. It was up on North University Avenue, right straight across from the current
Football stadium?
BYU football field.
Okay, then where'd you go to junior high?
And then for junior high, I went to Lincoln High out in Orem.
So you were bused, or how'd you get
Yeah,
there?
we'd bus out there.
Did you enjoy school?
I enjoyed school, yeah, I did. I had some unpleasant experiences in school to begin with, though, because when we moved from California, I guess I was pretty smart at the time when I lived in California. Ha ha ha. In the second grade there, they promoted me to the fourth grade, double promotion. I skipped the third. Okay, so I missed a lot of times tables and short division and stuff like that. It always made math hard for me. That's one point. It was unpleasant, but also for some reason, maybe because of my size, I think I was big. I towered above all of my peers. Even though I was in the fourth grade and they were fourth graders and I was really a third grader, I was still above them. And they would tease me. They'd tease me every.
Because you were big?
I guess. I don't know why. Every recess they would take me out in the corner of the building and they'd put a chip on my shoulder. Then they'd knock it off and see if I would fight them. And I wouldn't. I didn't like fighting. I was more pleasant, or maybe pleasant in the word, a softer personality. Fighting just didn't agree with me. It never did. I never enjoyed watching fist fights or wrestling or anything like that. Wrestling not so bad, but.
So then where'd you go to high school?
And then, let me continue on. They did that in that school where we first started school, and that was in the Major School temporarily down in Provo. Then we moved over to up to Pleasant View and in the Page School, and the kids treated me the same way. They were abusive. I'd walk home and they would push me off into the canal, or not the canal, a little ditch there. Just really treating me mean, and I was unhappy like that. One day, though, Garnbaum came walking out of the building. I was the policeman. I was a fancy name for a guy to pick up all the bats and the balls, in other words, after church, after school. And I was walking out of the building. He came behind me and he rammed me like a football player right in the back. And that set me off. I turned around, swung around, and swung at him and hit him right in the nose and broke his nose. From then on, things were okay.
You wish you would have done it earlier.
Yeah, wish I would have done it earlier. So from then on, things went pretty well socially, I guess.
So then you went to high school.
Then I went to high school, a whole new set of people mostly, and enjoyed that. Got to know kids and friends. And
Were you in plays?
I was in plays. You heard me go around here sometimes singing, "Oh, Lotta, do not flout me thus." And then I converted that to, "Gather round me, each and every one. We have something for you." And now I turn it into, "We're going to pray."
So that comes from a play or adaptation.
Yeah,
Okay, good.
yeah, and that was a little operetta that we
Uh-huh.
did. And they had those at school, and it was in them. I enjoyed them. Yeah, I had another fun activity was we got a recording machine at for the band and the chorus, and something going wrong there.
No, go ahead.
Uh, so the chorus director could record the chorus and see how it sounds. And somehow I got into being the one that operated the recorder. And that was fun. And then they installed a sound system in the school. And I was so interested in sound and electronic stuff that I would go to the library and I'd check out books on how to build a radio or how to do this and that electrically. And so when the installers came to put in the system, I said, hey, can I come and help you for nothing, just for the experience? And they did it at night while school was out. And so they worked till 12 or 1 o'clock at night. And I worked along with them. And so when we got through, I knew every wire in that building and all about it and how to operate the thing. And it was put in the principal's office. And when somebody wanted to use the machine, he'd say, oh, you have to get Wally to show you. So in that way, sort of, I became kind of important.
And that was your earliest interest in that type of work.
Yeah.
It's kind of still with you.
Well, yeah. I kind of wish I had been an electrician instead of a plumber. I think I would have enjoyed. I enjoy doing plumbing very much so, but I think I would have enjoyed the electrical part better. In fact, I started out after school. After I got back from the service, we can talk about that in a minute, but I was going to go to work for this electrician as an apprentice. And then I got a mission call. So that flubbed that up. When I came back, the picture was, interest and so forth was totally different.
So speaking of the church, now you were, your family wasn't active.
No, they weren't.
But then you had a friend who started you in primary.
Yes.
So did that continue all the way up through high
well,
school?
I attended seminary and tried to go to church, and but without the instruction at home, I was kind of always reaching out for what to do, and didn't know what to do, what life was, and what the meaning of life was, and so forth. And it was a struggle through my early years, through my youth, to know the church and know what it was about, to know the gospel.
Okay, so then when you were coming out of high school, what year was that? When did you graduate?
That was 44.
So the war is
1944, the war was on.
So what were the options for somebody coming out of high school and the war was on?
Either wait to be drafted or enlist.
And so most people enlisted so they would have a better choice?
A choice in where we wanted to go. And several of us chose the Navy, so we wouldn't have to sleep in a foxhole. We could sleep, maybe we'd be out on the ocean or something, but we'd have a bunk to sleep in, and we'd have food prepared for us. That would sound kind of selfish, but we thought the Navy would be a better.
Okay, so where did you enlist and where did you go from there?
Well, that was funny. They needed aviation. They'd come to the school to recruit, even though we could be drafted. They wanted to know what we were interested in, and they said they needed radio technicians, and I was interested in that kind of a thing, and 3 or 4 more of us were interested in that kind of thing. So we let that be known, and we went to Salt Lake to take a test to see if we could become radio technicians in the Navy. The guy brought in the test, flopped it on the table, and walked out of the room. So the 4 of us compared notes, and we all passed the test. And there was a lot of, in radio technician, in that trade, there was a lot of mathematics, and I was very weak on mathematics. So I first started out as a radio tech in boot camp first class seaman, when normally you're an apprentice seaman.
Yeah.
The pay was better and everything was better. But after boot camp and went into radio tech school, and a month later, very obviously I didn't know what I needed to know. And I had another consultation, and they put me in aviation electricity, which became very interesting what I did in that respect. It wasn't as technical mathematically as the radio tech was. But at least I started out with a first rate to begin
And
with.
they didn't degrade you, right?
No.
Okay.
So
where were you based?
I was based in Jacksonville, Florida for I guess about 9 months, going on a year, I've forgotten now. About 9 months, I think, studying school, aviation electrician school. And we enjoyed it there. Went to church at our own church occasionally. It was a distance away. On base, I went with the Presbyterian church on Sunday morning to sing in their choir, because I loved to sing. And I learned a very important principle at that point. I hadn't realized it before. I would try to get friends to go with me to church. And they would say, "No, I'm not going to church. Grew up all my life being forced to go to church, so now I'm not going to." So I learned there the principle of free agency, and applied that later on in raising children. I think it's a very important principle of the gospel.
So did anybody ever go to church with you?
Yeah, some guys went with me. Those that wanted to sing, I remember a couple of guys that went along with me, and we sang in their choir at the Presbyterian church.
So what happened after the 9 months?
Then we were transferred to Alameda Naval Air Station in California, working in what we call the Assembly and Repair Division. Right alongside of civilians, we would repair little electrical motors and that type of stuff to go on the airplanes. And it was like a 9-to-5 job. 8 to 5. It was 8 to 5 job. And that was fun, except I got to where they were painting. When they'd get through, they'd paint these motors, and some of them had to have a crinkle finish on, some a smooth finish and so forth, some lacquer, some enamel. And the people doing the electrical repairs didn't know the difference, and they had a little paint corner over there. They'd all go over there and paint, and they'd mix the paints up, lacquer with enamel, and it was a mess. And I said to the instructor one day, "Hey, let me take that corner over." And so I did, and so I was the painter. They called me Rembrandt. And that's what I did mostly there. And then one time, a friend of mine, a Navy friend of mine, said, "Hey, Wally, there's an opening over in the education division. If you're interested, you teach the rest of the guys what they need to know to go up for their next rate." And I applied for it and got the job. That was the easiest job I have ever had, in or out of the Navy. I'm not ashamed, because we were at war. But that was the assignment I had, and it was very easy. I had to teach 2 classes a week, one in the evening and one in the morning on Wednesday. Other than that, I was free to do what I wanted to do.
Wow.
So I went next door to the hobby shop, and I built a radio and all kinds of stuff like that. Had a Liberty card in my pocket all the time, and normally you get 1 day off and 4 days on. Had the Liberty card in my pocket. Mom and Dad had moved to Richmond, which was about 12 miles from there, for Dad to work in the shipyards. So I got to where I was living out there with them.
Huh.
And
hopefully you were saving some money.
I was commuting, saving money. It was costing me money to go back and forth, but otherwise I'd live on the base. And an interesting, cute thing there is that other departments began to get jealous of us having our Liberty cards all the time and having the freedom to go and come whenever we want. So an ensign called us in, ensign it's called, and the ensign is a church man. Our ensign called us in and said, hey, we got to clamp down here a little bit. I mean, we're getting some complaints. From now on, we got to be here at 8 o'clock in the morning. You can keep your card, keep your Liberty card in your possession if you want, but we all got to be here at 8 o'clock in the morning. Except Chatwin, you and so, you live quite a ways out. You can come in at 10. That's the kind of duty it was.
Yeah. So backing up, do you remember when Pearl Harbor was bombed?
Yeah.
What was the general feeling and your reaction, and were you surprised?
Something surprised and something awful and just like not to the end of the world, but I mean traumatic. Didn't like it at all.
Was it at that point you pretty much figured you'd be in the service? Because there wasn't a draft really. We weren't in the war.
I don't know when the draft. Yeah, that's right. We weren't at war, were we? Yeah. So it was later on that we realized that we would be. And let's see, 41 was when Pearl Harbor was bombed, wasn't it? So we were just in high school. We were just sophomores.
So were you in California when the war ended?
Yes, I was at the Naval Air Station in Alameda.
And so what was did you really understand what was all going on with the atomic bomb and all of that?
Yeah, somewhat, yeah. I knew what happened and so forth. I didn't like the service. I just didn't like the containment. I wanted more freedom. Even with this easy assignment that I had, I still just didn't like the service. I was homesick, sort of, to a certain extent. I wanted to be home. And so I was ready to get out as soon as I could. I was just about ready to get to my next advancement. I had advanced to Petty Officer Second Class, and I was just about to get up to Petty Officer First Class when I was eligible to be discharged. I jumped at that.
So where did you go from there?
Went from there.
Home.
Went home to Provo.
You were how old then?
Well, I had to be, let's see, I was about 20, 19 or 20. Yeah.
So did you immediately, how did your mission call come about?
Well, I started to go to school at BYU. And for just a few months, and very shortly, during that time I was associated with a very good friend who was active in the church, and he was going to go on a mission, and so I was influenced to go on a mission, and I wanted to, and so that's when I got the call.
And you were called where?
To a Spanish American mission.
And what did that include?
It included 5 southern states. It was a big mission.
So what states?
It included Texas.
All of Texas?
All of Texas. Parts of Louisiana. New Mexico. The lower part of Colorado. All of Nevada. And the southern part of California.
That's big.
Poor mission president. He just we seldom saw him, and he put a lot of mileage on his car.
So it was a Spanish-speaking mission.
Spanish-speaking.
So where did you learn Spanish?
At that time, they didn't have a MTC, language training, or anything like that. They sent us up to Salt Lake. We spent 10 days there listening to the general authorities teach us the principles of the gospel, what we should know to teach. There wasn't any lesson plan. It was just what we needed to know to teach the gospel. And then at that time, the mission was 2.5 years instead of 2. And the reason it was 2.5, to give us an extra 6 months to learn the language. And
so English-speaking missionaries went for 2 years, and language, you had to learn a language, went 2.5.
2.5. And they just put a book in our hand, Turk's Introduction to Spanish. Said, here, learn it. I read that book 3 times, and I got pretty good on the grammar of Spanish. But I always faltered, and still today falter on vocabulary. So, but that's how we learn Spanish. And but we got in an area, see, we're in Houston, we were among people who always spoke English. I mean, we weren't like down in Mexico or South American country or something, where we really would have learned it, picked up the vocabulary a lot faster. But we talked English 3/4 of the time. So it was.
So what areas were you in?
We were in Houston for a year, and then transferred up to northern New Mexico, into Taos, and first up into a place called Llano above Penasco, which is about 29 miles above Taos, and worked a little bit in Española, and then back up in Taos again, and that was the rest of my
So
mission.
tell us about the church in Taos.
The church in Taos is a small branch, actually 2 branches, Spanish-speaking branch and an English-speaking branch. And they were having troubles between themselves, not arguing or anything, but they just always wanting to, the English-speaking, the Anglos wanted to have it all in English, and the Spanish-speakings all wanted to have it all in Spanish. And they were back and forth and back and forth, and it went back and forth for a while there.
They meet in the same building?
They were in the same building. Mom Trujillo and Dad Trujillo had a piece of ground there that they had donated, or they didn't donate it to church, but they let the church build a little building there on the property right by their house. It was just a little one-room house, one-room building, a chapel, and then behind it 2 little rooms with a kitchen and a bedroom, and that became classrooms, and I was going to say at night, classrooms during the services. And then later on, this was not part of my mission, but later on we when we moved there, and we'll get into that story a little bit, I guess, why they built a newer building down the road, and a pretty nice building. Then later on after that, they built a beautiful chapel when it became a ward.
So you talk about the Trujillos. Tell me about that family.
The Trujillo home was a home to the missionaries. We could come down from Penasco to get our supplies, and we just knew we had a bed to sleep in. And we could go in and look in the fridge and find something to eat. I mean, it was just like home. I mean, that's the way Mom Trujillo treated the missionaries.
And they were some of the first members in Taos?
They were. She was the first one, along with her cousin, to be baptized. Cousin or sister-in-law, I forget which it was. Nora will be able to tell you. They were the first ones to be baptized in the branch. And Dad Trujillo was the branch president when I was on the mission. And he was the branch president for a long time. It was just a floundering little branch for a while. But little by little, as they got more organized, this was after the mission, I guess, they began to get it together better, and they began to have English-speaking meetings with Spanish-speaking classes where needed.
So they met together.
Yeah, they met together, and that was the best arrangement. But for a while there, it was hard for them to get it together.
Okay, so you became ill.
On the mission, yeah. For about a year, let's see, I guess I spent just a little bit better than a year in northern New Mexico, and a lot of it up around Penasco. And I was ill. I was stomach problems, and we couldn't find out what was the matter. And I went to different clinics in Santa Fe and around to try to find out what was happening to me. I was just always feeling sick and down, but we couldn't put my finger on it. And then I got sicker and sicker towards the end there, about 3 months before my mission was up. And Dr. DeVoe in Taos did some really midnight oil searching, and he came back and he says, Elder Chatwin, I don't know if he called me Elder Chatwin or Mr. Chatwin or Wally or what, but he says, you've got yellow jaundice. You've got an infected liver. And at that time, see, that was 100 years ago. They didn't know anything about livers. And Sister Trujillo, just before that, thought I had an ulcer. And so she was her compassionate. Let me stop here for a second and turn this
Go
off.
ahead.
So
Okay, so the doctor?
Sister Trujillo, very compassionate, and wanted to help me, and she thought I had an ulcer. And the doctor almost simultaneously came up with an analysis that I had infectious hepatitis. But she gave me, for an ulcer, she gave me rich, thick cream. You know, they used to milk the cow and pour the milk in a flat container, and then the cream would raise to the top and they would skim it off. And that's what she would feed me. She thought it was going to coat my stomach and heal my ulcer. Well, it was the worst thing that she could have done. I just really got sick, and then it was confirmed what the doctor said. And so, yeah, I was sick, and I actually went to hospital for a couple of weeks.
So is it yellow jaundice or hepatitis, or is that the same
That's
thing?
the same thing, yeah.
Okay.
Yellow jaundice is
Results.
is the nickname, is a symptom of the hepatitis.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had a couple of weeks in the hospital, and then the doctor said, you're going to have to rest for 6 months. So the mission's president said, well, come on down to the mission home. And so I spent a week or two there, and he said, Elder Chatwin, you're going to have to rest for a while. You can't get out in labor, and you've only got 2 months left on your mission. You might as well go home. Give you an honorable discharge and go on home. Okay. So I'm home.
Well, what was the connection with the Trujillo family while you were there?
The connection with, we lived right next door to them. See, finally we were living in the back quarters of the chapel there. So we were right next door, so there was a lot of compatibility back and forth. And
Now, you never met Nora while you were there.
no.
So what's the story with that?
Later on, while I was there, I did, yes, of course, she came home. But in the beginning, I just walked in the house and one day and saw this picture of she and her sisters on the wall. And this is could be a long story, but to make it short, just something happened there. I mean, there she is. It was a feeling like there she is. And that was strange, though, because I was currently engaged to another wonderful girl in Provo, in Orem.
Uh-huh.
And this other girl, Nina Stratton, we dated for 1.5 years in high school. I went off on the service, and it was kind of understood between us. I come back and we dated. I went on my mission, and when I left for my mission, we got engaged. I mean, it was that serious. And so I wasn't looking for anybody. My eyes weren't, I was doing missionary work. But I saw that picture and it's just like, oh, there she is. And she wasn't even there. She was off in Oakland working. And her mother said, Elder Chatwin, write to my daughter. I want her to come home. I'm concerned about her being out there in the world, and I want her home. So I wrote a very platonic letter and said, hey, your mother wants you home, and this, that, and the other. You ought to consider that. Well, she came home for Thanksgiving, and that's when we met. And it was the same feeling with her. There he is. I don't know if that was exactly those words, but I mean, it just something between us was right. Although we didn't know each other, and we weren't dating or courting or anything like that. And then it was the holidays coming up, and less missionary actually out, bang, 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 during Christmas time, and Christmas presentations going on and things like that. And So we got to converse more than usual and got to know each other a little bit more. So when I was sent home, the first call I made was to call up Nora and say, hey, come on up to Provo and let's date a while.
It wasn't to your fiance.
The first call I made, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did call her and I said, I'm sorry, I think something's going on here. I need to honestly let you know that something else might happen. In other words, they talk about a missionary getting a Dear John letter after he's on his mission for a while. His girlfriend writes and says, I found somebody else, I'm getting married. Well, this time it was a dear lady to her. And she was a wonderful person, just very spiritual and smart, and we hit it off very well. But the Lord, I guess I know now, had something more in store for us to accomplish.
So how did that progress then, after you called her?
She came up and we dated a couple of months. 2 months later, we were married in the Salt Lake Temple. We got some static over it. At that time, a mixed marriage wasn't looked upon with favor. And even the church authorities up there, as Nora was being interviewed, I think it's probably, I don't remember now, it's probably for her temple recommend. So we go to the temple. The stake presidency would ask us, what are you going to call your kids? And I wasn't smart alecky then like I might be considered now. I could have said, well, we haven't thought of a name yet, whether they're a boy or a girl or something like that, but what are you going to call your kids? And we got a lot of static in that respect. But and the first 5 years of our marriage, it was off and on. I mean, we were compatible, but I shouldn't say had problems, no problems, but it was just a challenge because of two different cultures and two different backgrounds. A lot of things we had to adjust.
So what did her parents and your parents think?
They were both in favor of it, except my mother offended Nora somewhat in that she wished that I had married Nida, because then I would have perhaps stayed home and not gone off to New Mexico. But she loved Nora, but she loved her, but she made that statement one time and that hurt Nora considerably.
Sure. So where did you live?
We first lived with my parents, right, for a while, and then we moved down to New Mexico to Taos and lived with her parents for I'd say a while, a few weeks each place. And then we went up to Los Alamos. They moved up. Her dad was working up there as a carpenter at Los Alamos, and he acquired a house up there to live in, and the whole family moved up there. We went up there and lived with them for a while, and I worked at Los Alamos as a painter, painting apartments that they were building. And then we finally, let's see, where did we go from there? At that time I started to sell wherever aluminum. And so we around Taos for a while, a little bit in Los Alamos, and then we moved to Albuquerque. I guess the first real residence on our own was out off of East Central in Albuquerque. And we lived there several months, and that's where Lynn was. Now wait a minute, I'm getting mixed up here, because that's where Lynn was born. No. Yeah, we moved to Provo and lived there, and that's where Susan was born. She was born in Orem, in Maud Park's nursing home, the mother of a friend of mine. And then we moved to Albuquerque. And Lynn, that's a year and a half, 2 years later, Lynn was born in Albuquerque, December 30th or 31st. When's Lynn's birthday? 90.
So did you go to California
51.
from Albuquerque?
Say that again?
When did you go to California?
No, then I'm a little mixed up right now of our own history. Because Susan was born in Provo. Then we must have gone back to Provo, because we even bought a house in Provo. This was after she was born. We bought a house. Oh, I got it now. We went to Provo soon after the marriage, so I could continue to attend BYU. And we had an apartment there. Yeah, then we lived there. There's where we lived in Provo to begin with. And then we came to New Mexico, and then to Los Alamos to paint, and then I started selling wherever aluminum. And then we ended up in Provo again. We bought a house there, and was still selling. Things didn't go too well in the selling overall there, so we finally moved to Denver. And we lived a couple of years there in Denver. We bought a new house under construction and lived there for a couple of years, and then in 1955 we moved to Los Angeles. I was tired after nearly 7.5 years of selling wherever aluminum, putting on demonstrations, not tired of the work, but it was backwards. I was taught to do my work and then play and relax. But it was the other way around. I had to go hustle in the afternoon for appointments and all, put on demonstrations at night, another night go sell, close the sale, and I had no time in the evening with the family. It took me totally away from the family. I was at home for the first till noon or so, and the kids were in school, so it wasn't right. And I finally decided to move with wherever to California and get into the store trade of selling wherever aluminum, calling on stores and selling them and stocking and filling their needs.
Now, was it when you went to California that you started doing building type work?
Well, yes and no. Began there a few years afterwards. We bought this first house and fixed it up a little bit. And then we moved over to another house and we added to it and fixed it up. And finally, I would tell Nora, "Hey, we can't live in this house anymore. It's worth more than we can afford." So we'd move out, and we finally moved over to Reseda in the San Fernando Valley. Before that, though, during this time before we moved to Reseda, I was very good friends with a guy named Woody Bloomgren, and he and I and another friend in the church, Vance Davenport, we got together, the three of us, and we'd go buy a house, and we'd fix it up and then sell it. We did about 1, 2, maybe 3 of those like that. Never really made any money, but it started out getting us experience. Vance was in the plumbing business, so that was taken care of. And Woody just had a hand for doing things. So anyway, then we moved to Reseda, and I started working as a plumber. Started working for Vance even before that as a plumber, and then I worked on up over there.
And you liked California?
And we liked California, yeah, we liked it. Except it was smoggy, and we didn't like the smog. And then one Christmas visit out to Taos, my brother-in-law, J.C. Cantu, said, "Wally, why don't you come out here and set up a plumbing business?" And I said, "Oh, in Taos? No." But the more I thought about it, and I did a little research for a couple of days there, and I found out that plumbing needs just weren't being taken care of. So I gave it some thought. And at that time, I was just a journeyman plumber, and so I had to take some tests and so forth. But on the way home, we talked about the possibility, and we decided soon after that yes, we would move to Taos. Took a vote among all the kids. I thought it was a unanimous vote at the time, but Susan said later, no, she was always opposing it. She later on agreed that it was the right thing to do, but she originally opposed it.
And when you were in Reseda, then Carolyn was born.
Yeah, no, Carolyn was born when we had the first house.
I mean, but in California.
In California, yeah.
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 So
And then
then,
Lori was born in California.
and then after that, then you packed your bags.
Kevin was born in California, come to think of it.
Oh, he was.
Yeah, while we lived in Reseda. He was born there right before we moved.
Oh.
Just a few months before we moved, Kevin was born in California.
Hmm.
And then we packed our bags and moved to Taos. And that was a real major thing. I think it appears that the Lord wanted us over in Taos. It was a big advantage for our family. We began to grow there in the church because we were then a minority. And we either had to accept it and promote it or die church-wise. And it really helped us to grow in that respect. One example of how it went to get out to Taos, it's kind of interesting. We lived in this house in Reseda, and I added on to it, and we put a built-in swimming pool in the backyard, and it was something else. It was a beautiful home. And then when it came time to sell it, we decided to move to Taos. The real estate lady says, "You're not going to get out of this house what you want out of it because it's overdeveloped for the neighborhood." Everything else was selling for $118,000, and no, wait, not 118, no, 18,000, and we wanted 29. Ooh, we won't get it. So we listed it very early, so that we'd have this was in April. So that by the time school was out, maybe it would sell by then, which would be in June. We listed it early, and 10 days later it sold for our 29. And so then what did we do? We had to find a place to live because we had to be out within 30 days. We went looking for an apartment. Nobody would take us. 4 kids, 3 kids at that time. No, 4. Anyway, with all your kids, nobody's gonna, we don't want you. You'll tear the place up for only, we were being honest with them. You'll tear the place up for just 3 or 4 months. So we couldn't find a place to live. We were up against it. Then I drove by this one place on the corner about 3 blocks from where we lived. And here was an old run-down house, just a mess. It was an eyesore. And it had been foreclosed upon. There was a sign there that the bank owned it now. I went and talked to the bank and made a deal with them and bought it. And we fixed it up. We moved into it and fixed it up while we were planning to move, just to fix it up and sell it. And it was another hardship for Nora, though. She was expecting Kevin. And about the time she was delivered to deliver is when we had to move into this house. And about that same time my dad died, and I had to go up to his funeral that same weekend. So the 70s quorum moved Nora while I was in Provo at my dad's funeral. And poor thing, it rained, it just poured that whole weekend. It was a nightmare for her. Anyway, to make a story short, or a little shorter, I guess, things went on from there, and I finished off the house, or I was finishing it up. Nora went on ahead. Jean Cantu came out and took our truck and hauled she and the kids out to Taos and get moved, and I stayed with the house until it would sell.
And that one took longer.
That took about 3 weeks is all.
Oh, well, good.
Sold it and made
So by then you had quit selling wherever.
Oh, I'd quit
and
selling
you
wherever
were
a
a
long time
plumber
ago.
full time.
I was a plumber full time, and in fact, while I was remodeling this house, I was going to work for 8 hours and then come home and remodel a house at night. And I said, "Hey, let's look what we're doing here. We're moving. I don't need to hang on to this plumbing job. I'll just quit that and spend my full time remodeling the house, which I did. It sold and very quickly, and made about $5,000, which wasn't much, but at that time it was
That was a
a
lot.
pretty good little profit for selling. And so we ended up in Taos, and it was pretty generally agreed that we would go to Taos, and it was a favorable experience all the way through. We went through a lot of hardships in Taos, partly in our building and my building contracting and so forth, and partly in the church. There were some adversities that happened, but that helped, I think, helped to make us strong. When we first got there, I started out as a plumbing, Wally's Plumbing and Heating. And it was, things were so wonderful, that the business was so great, I was working 14 hours a day. I had to have somebody help me. So a guy by the name of Rod Thomas came as my partner, with the idea that if things went well as we, both of us, we'd go into business together, and we did. We were in business for 15 years, plumbing and building, and then we split up because it wasn't compatible in some ways. But it was hard to split up because we, by that time, owned quite a bit. But we finally found a way. We sold off the shopping center that we built and divided up our assets, and we were able to split. And then I started on my own as a builder, and earned a pretty good reputation over there of building real quality homes. And it went well for the most part. I won't go into all the details of some of the adversities that we had with dissatisfied customers who they weren't dissatisfied because we did a bad job. They were just the kind that want to sue to begin with and so forth. But anyway, we had a good experience in building. It was touch and go, up and down. The building businesses, sometimes $5 in the bank, sometimes 100,000 or more in the bank, and off and on. So, but we made it. We made it all right. But we were able to grow in the church, and that was the important thing. My patriarchal blessing said I was foreordained for hard labor in the church. So I joked about having to go bust out rocks or something and so forth, and could give a lot of detail about there where I've worked on plumbing in the church in California, and that kind of hard labor, but also hard labor as a servant. And 6 months after we got there, I was called to be the branch president. I think the Lord wanted us there. It was interesting that all the time while we were in California, every time there'd be a change in the bishopric, I would kind of wait for an interview. Because the patriarch said, "You sound like you might be a bishop someday." So okay. So I'd wait for an interview, and nobody would interview me. And I was kind of offended. And then I realized, hey, you're coveting that job. Shouldn't do that. And then I forgot all about it. I had nothing in mind when I moved to Taos. It was farthest from my mind. And just like that, it's called to be the branch president. And from then on, it went branch president to branch president, and then up in Penasco, branch president, a couple of stints on the High Council, and in between, and then bishop, and so forth. And then later on, I was doing other things in the ward, always acting in the ward, of course we all were. But what am I trying to say here? And quickly. A problem came up in the ward that needed to be solved, and it wasn't being handled. They needed to get a new bishop to do it. And the stake president came to me finally and said, "Wally, your name keeps coming up, and the Lord keeps saying that you're the one to take care of this problem, but we keep pushing it aside. So you've been there and done that. Let's get somebody else. It didn't work. You're the one. We feel sorry for you for what you have to do, but the Lord wants you there." And so I was a bishop again, and it took Took a while to get it settled, but we did. And the ward began to thrive from there. Our kids grew in the church. They grew in the community. They were well respected in the community. Everybody liked them and saw their integrity and so forth.
And Sherry was born there, I guess.
And Sherry was born there. And everything about it was pleasant for us in that respect. It was a good move for us to be in Taos and live in Taos. And our kids grew up knowing the gospel, going on missions, and serving the Lord. And Sherry says, all the time I was growing up, my dad was either branch president or bishop. But that's all right. That was a good service, good experience. Can you stop it for a minute?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's blinking, is that right? Is it recording when it's blinking?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, yeah, it's just telling us that the tape's getting short.
Okay. Well, we were very pleasant in Taos, and things went well in Taos, but we had some health issues. I got a TIA, a transient ischemic attack, which is a small stroke, and that didn't affect me too much at that time, but then I crushed my foot, and that set me back business-wise, and I had to start hiring out everything that was done on building, and even so, we built this beautiful mansion of a house in Taos, and we enjoyed it very much, and that was going to be our house to live in forever. But we couldn't handle it. It wasn't part of the plan. I think, again, the Lord wanted us down here, or recognized that we would need to be down here, because I said to Nora, we got to retire. And if we're going to retire, we're going to have to sell out and scale down. We tried to stay in Taos. We loved Taos. Nora was born and raised there. We didn't want to leave Taos, but economically we had to. And we searched around and looked for a place to live, and we ended up down here at Bosque Farms. And it was a good move. I could tell all the details about that, how we decided Bosque Farms, and that was very interesting in that real shortly, there wasn't a temple when we came here. And yet we made a list of what we would look for as to where we would move, and everything fit here except there was no temple. But it just felt right, and we kept praying the Lord, let us know, and we knew, and it just felt right, so we followed the Spirit, and we moved here. And 10 days after we made an offer on the house, came the announcement that there would be a temple here. So it was perfect. And a lot of other things have gone well for us. We've had more health issues down here, but we got into a health plan, Loveless Health Plan, that just takes care of us all the way through, and so that's been very good. That was a wise move in that respect. We have a wonderful ward here. We're happy. We love each other. People we just both had been diagnosed lately with cancer, and yet we've gone to cancer radiation treatment together, and everybody's so amazed that we're doing things together. And they always call us our favorite couple because they see the love between us, and we enjoy each other. So it's been a wonderful experience living with each other, raising these children, and trying to keep the Lord's commandments and serving the Lord.
Great.